Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Ecolab's webinar on the changing landscape of disinfection, claims, and efficient application. I'm Amanda Bakken, and with me today is Casey Struhler. So just a couple of quick housekeeping reminders before we get started. Today's session is going to be recorded, and it will be available through ISSA's platform through March. So if you have any colleagues that may be interested in this topic, but may be unable to join today, feel free to direct them to that recording, and they can watch it at a later time. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of this, so if you have any questions throughout our talk today, feel free to submit them through that chat feature, and we'll get to them at the end. And then if we don't get to your question, or if you have another topic you want to dig into, we are also hosting an Ask the Expert session that is going to start directly after this. So if you would like to join that, you can find the link to join on Ecolab's exhibitor page under the scheduled events. So we will get started. Wherever you are at with your business today, we are here to discuss some best practices to ensure that your employees, your customers, and your guests are able to return to clean and healthy environments, whether that's now or sometime in the coming months. Now, Ecolab has been in the business of cleaning for 97 years as a trusted partner in hygiene and infection prevention. And our focus is all about delivering outcomes. So whether that's enhancing customers' experience through clean surfaces or well-maintained floors, or creating healthy environments by providing personalized disinfection programs, or even optimizing operations to best utilize what's your greatest resource, which is your people. We're able to do this by pairing our extensive field support and our expertise with innovative cleaning programs and some really flexible training options. So you've got all the resources that you need to succeed. Now, let me introduce myself and my fellow speaker for today. So my name is Amanda Bakken. I am a lead chemist and a disinfection expert for Ecolab, and I've been with the company for 12 years. I specialize in surface hygiene products, including disinfectants, and I'm a member of Ecolab's Public Health and Food Safety Leadership Team. With me today is Casey Struhler. Casey is a disinfection procedure and training specialist for Ecolab, providing technical expertise to some of our largest global customers and consulting on matters specifically related to COVID-19 and reopening procedures. She's been at Ecolab for 5 years and has held a variety of roles, including in regulatory and research and development. Now, it is tough to talk about reopening businesses as we're moving into the winter months and starting to see some COVID-19 cases rise, and many states starting to move back to restrictions on businesses. And while we can't control the pandemic and we can't control restrictions that are placed on businesses, it's still critical to remember that the cleaners and the janitorial staff are also on the front lines of this thing too, and they are doing everything they can to make these spaces safe for people that either still have to go to work or to the doctor or to the grocery store. And so our goal is to make sure that they are equipped with the right tools and procedures to make them as efficient and as effective as possible. The world has changed, right? I think that is something we can all recognize, and how we handle hygiene has changed because of it. There is an increased demand for disinfection. People want to know that the places they are going are not only clean, but they're safe. So this means that cleaning practices are not just about cleaning for appearance anymore. It's not just about making spaces smell and look nice, but it's about cleaning for public health. Now, this shifts the focus from your typical steps of vacuuming and wiping to more specialized protocols that include disinfection. Now, once you implement those protocols, you have to make them visible. You've got to communicate to people the steps you're taking and the standards that you're working towards to protect them. And this piece is more important than ever because it signals to your staff the importance of what they're doing and the impact that they're making, as well as building confidence in the people that are going to come in and use that space. Now, employee training and the cost of labor is something that I would kind of call a perpetual challenge, but it's been made new again. With this year's economy, many businesses are dealing with big swings in their workforce. So whether you've had to bring in new employees or you have a seasoned crew, these changes are putting new demands on your team. That's going to require additional training on disinfecting, maybe new areas or touch points they need to focus on, or even cleaning at different frequencies. You may also be facing increased wages to attract or retain talent on your staff. And when all this comes together, it just becomes very critical to be able to train employees quickly and efficiently. So today we're going to cover ways to build a high-performing, high-efficiency operation and cover the different products and resources that you can leverage to get there. So we're going to start off by covering the basics of chemistry selection with an emphasis placed on choosing the right disinfectant for your needs. We'll go through various methods of application, including things like electrostatic spraying and tips to be successful there. And Casey's going to then cover the importance of procedures and how they vary depending on what you're cleaning. So the way I like to think of it is this. I could have the best hammer in the world, but if I use it to try to cut down a tree, I'm going to struggle, right? So the same goes with cleaning. The best chemistry in the world is only as good as the procedures you use it with. And then lastly, Casey is going to talk about ways to demonstrate all the great work that your staff are doing to clean and protect your facilities and how you can build confidence in safety with your customers and guests. So to the chemistry. Now, I am a self-admitted chemistry geek, so this section is kind of fun for me. But my hope is that you're going to come away with this with some tips for how to choose the right tool for the right job. Now, there are many different options out there today that can be used to achieve clean surfaces. So it's really important to understand the differences between those tools so that you can pick the right one for the job at hand. So I wanted to get us all on the same page regarding the different options available. The first category is cleaners. Now, these are products designed to remove soil from a surface, but they don't kill any bacteria or viruses. They're very great for tough soil removal applications. So if you think like a pot and pan detergent or a degreaser would fit well into this category. A sanitizer is able to reduce the number of bacteria on a surface, but it doesn't fully eliminate them. So sanitizers are also unable to target viruses, which makes them somewhat limited in their antimicrobial performance. These are most typically used on food contact surfaces as they are required by the food code. Disinfectants are products that are able to both eliminate bacteria and inactivate viruses. So these are typically used for areas where there's going to be a risk of spreading disease or illness, such as restrooms or any high touch point surface. Both sanitizers and disinfectants are regulated by the US EPA. And what that means is that any claims these products make have to be reviewed and approved for use by the EPA. Now, these types of approved claims for every registered product are publicly available on EPA's website and on the commercial product label. Now, of course, in times of very quick change, such as the pandemic, new claims on products may not show up right away on the commercial label on the package itself. There's usually some sort of lead time in turning inventory over, but the label on the EPA's website can always be accessed for the most up-to-date claims and directions for use. And it's also really critical to remember that with antimicrobials, the label is the law on these types of products. So federal regulations require that these products be used according to the label directions, and off-label use is against the law. And as always, please remember these products are not for use on or in people or animals. They are only to be used exclusively on inanimate objects and surfaces. Now, when it comes to killing pathogens, there are sanitizers and disinfectants. So how do you know which product to choose? Now, the most important question to ask yourself here is, what are you trying to clean? So for food contact surfaces, a food contact sanitizer is going to be your best bet. So this covers like eating and food preparation areas, as well as those 3 compartment sinks, and is going to meet the food code requirements for sanitation in those areas. This type of product gets used in a 2 or a 3-step cleaning procedure where you're either going to clean, rinse, and sanitize, or clean and sanitize depending on the product, and then allow those surfaces to stay wet for 1 minute. For non-food contact surfaces, a hard surface disinfectant is recommended. So this is going to provide that disinfection level kill performance against the broadest range of germs, including those found in restrooms and healthcare settings. A disinfectant should also be your go-to tool for any pandemic cleaning procedures due to its ability to target viruses. Now, these products get used either in a 1-step procedure or a 2-step clean and then disinfect process. But again, the surface needs to stay wet for that contact time that's listed on the label. This is going to vary from product to product, so it's very important to check the solution that you're using to ensure you're using it the right way to get the full kill performance that you're expecting. Now, not just any disinfectant is approved for use against the pandemic virus. So the EPA created what they call List N, which is a comprehensive list of all of the product registrations that are approved for use against SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19. So prior to choosing a disinfectant for your pandemic cleaning procedures, make sure that it is approved on List N. And the easiest way to do this is just to search EPA List N online. It should be the first search result that comes up, and go to the EPA's tool. It's going to ask you for the EPA registration number, and this is going to be found printed somewhere on the label of the product. Now, if you don't have access to the label, it's often able to be found on the product SDS or the company's website. EPA registration numbers are going to be split into several parts. So the first part is the company number, the second section is the product number, and it's these two parts you're going to enter into that tool. Occasionally, a product is also going to have a third part to that number, but you're going to omit that when you're searching the tool. So only use those first two parts. Now, once you hit enter, the tool is going to populate a table with information about that product registration. So important things to know about this table. The product name that you see may not match the product that you have, and that's okay. As long as the EPA registration number matches the first two parts of your product's number, you're good to go. This happens because sometimes the same product registration, that same chemistry, may have multiple brand names associated with it, and EPA is only going to list one in this table. Well, products also get added to this list through a number of ways. They can have a direct kill claim against SARS-CoV-2, or they can have claims against other viruses that would indicate performance against the pandemic virus, such as human coronavirus, norovirus, rotavirus, polio. Like there's a list that meet the criteria. And whichever virus allowed the product to be approved with that list is going to be listed in that fifth column. And this is important to know because that's the virus you need to follow for use directions such as dilution and contact time. So for an example here, peroxide multi-surface cleaner and disinfectant has a direct kill claim against SARS-CoV-2 with a 30-second contact time. What's important to notice here is that this table does not include dilution instructions. So you're still going to need to look at the product label to get that information, as well as any specific directions for use. Now, if a registration number you search does not show up in this table, that product is not approved for use against the pandemic virus. All right, so now that you have confirmed that your disinfectant is approved for use in COVID-19 applications, what else should you look for? Well, I mentioned earlier that disinfectants can be one or two-step products. So I really recommend looking for a one-step product in order to drive time and labor savings in your operations. So these are products that are not going to require surfaces to be pre-cleaned prior to disinfection, and they can be identified with claims such as one step on them, or they might be called cleaner and disinfectant. Two-step products are ones that will have statements such as must pre-clean surfaces or only use on a clean surface. And what that means is you'll actually have to go over those surfaces twice, once with a cleaner and then a second time with the disinfectant in order to get the appropriate kill performance. You should also look for a disinfectant with broad efficacy. And what that means is that it has many claims against many varieties of bacteria and viruses. So even though we are up to our necks with everything COVID related right now, the other germs haven't gone away. So in fact, we are sliding right into flu season as we speak. If you think about restrooms and gyms, those are places where all kinds of different pathogens like to live. The pandemic virus is actually fairly easy to kill, but other pathogens such as MRSA or norovirus are much more challenging. So make sure that the disinfectant you choose can be your single solution to cover all of these needed applications. What about green cleaning? With the expanded use of disinfectants, how can your business continue to pursue its sustainability and environmental stewardship goals? Well, unfortunately, the EPA does not allow third parties such as Green Seal or the USDA bio-based program to make certifications on EPA registered products. And Safer Choice, which is the EPA's own eco-certification program, only has ready-to-use solutions approved. And that gets to be very expensive and actually very heavy on packaging waste, which doesn't quite align with environmental stewardship goals. So instead of relying on a third-party certification, I recommend you take the power into your own hands to drive your business's sustainability goals by identifying outcomes that are most critical to you. So these could fall in the categories of human health and safety or environmental stewardship. Now, if you're looking to target human health and safety, look for disinfectants that have features along the top row here. So things like being PPE free to simplify training and ensure safe use. Make sure it has packaging that's designed to reduce worker exposure to the chemistry. So things like fitments that are within the bottle, or the ability to be dispensed through a closed loop dispensing system. You can look for products that are either fragrance free or compliant with IFRA's guidance, and IFRA is the global standard for fragrance safety. And chemistries that are formulated to be low in VOCs and in compliance with CARB regulations. So this is really going to minimize any of those hazards in the air. To further your goals around environmental responsibility, look for features along the bottom row. So these are going to be products with ingredients that are biodegradable. So things like the surfactants that are in them are not going to persist in the environment after you use them or after they get disposed. Look for products that are not toxic to aquatic life or have a low impact on aquatic environments. And this is going to include things with no or a low phosphorus level to really limit some of that nutrient pollution. And look for products that are concentrates. So these are going to both reduce packaging waste and emissions and have just a smaller carbon footprint due to the limited manufacturing and transportation needs with those. All right, so now that you have your chemistry selected, how do you go about applying it? This next section is going to cover various application methods and how to choose the best one for the job. So let us start with spraying and the three main tools that we use there. Trigger sprayers are going to be the most traditional way of applying a product, and they work really well to direct a product to a surface. This type of application is really best suited for kind of those small or mid-sized areas, so think restrooms or entryways, or places where you might need a really directed spray. They're very cost effective. They've got a low upfront investment needed, but they do tend to require the most work just because of that manual trigger application. Especially for disinfection, you may need to also spread the product around on a surface with a cloth just to ensure even coverage after it's sprayed on. Pressurized sprayers are better suited for larger areas, and they provide a more continuous style of spray. They typically still require some manual effort to pressurize the tank, and they're best suited for some of those large non-food contact areas, such as like loading docks. One application method that is quickly growing in popularity is applying product through an electrostatic sprayer. Now, electrostatic sprayers are powered units. They are either battery powered or plug-in, and they apply a charge to droplets as they leave the unit. Now, this charge is going to cause the droplets to kind of behave like tiny magnets, and ensures that they're going to be more readily attracted to the surfaces that you're trying to spray. These units typically require a higher upfront investment in the equipment, but they can provide time and labor savings in your disinfectant procedures when you compare it to using a trigger spray bottle. Now, this type of application is regulated separately by the EPA, so it does require separate testing to ensure that your chemistry can still disinfect when it's applied through this equipment. You're going to be able to know if your product is approved for this application by finding specific directions for use that talk about electrostatic spraying, either on the product label or again on EPA's website, and there's going to be some defined procedures to follow. The EPA also requires specific PPE for all chemistries that are used through electrostatic sprayers. So be prepared to use either an N95 mask or a half-face respirator in addition to your normal PPE. Now, this is an EPA requirement and it is specific to this application. So that same chemistry that you might use through a trigger sprayer would not require that respiratory PPE when used through a trigger sprayer. There are some great benefits to using this type of application though. So not only are droplets attracted to the surface, better allowing you to get product kind of where you want it to go, but because those droplets are given the same charge, they actually repel each other in the air to spread out more evenly across the surface and provide more uniform and comprehensive coverage. It also provides a continuous spray functionality. So this allows users to move very quickly around a space while still getting very consistent coverage. And it can deliver disinfection across a large area, again, using less time and less chemistry than you would typically expect to see from a manual trigger sprayer. Best suited, again, for those non-food contact areas and really high touch point surfaces where that risk of transmission is going to be the highest. So it's important to note that electrostatic spraying does not replace the need for periodic manual cleaning. So this is a really important point to keep in mind. These devices are not going to remove soil, they're not going to remove debris or body fluids. They only help distribute products more evenly across surfaces and in those difficult to reach areas. So it is still very critical to plan in a manual cleaning step periodically to take care of those soils. Now, if you're looking to implement electrostatic spraying in your operation, start by first identifying those areas where it makes the most sense. So these are going to be places where you've got maybe large areas of hard surfaces or high touch points, and definitely areas that are non-food contact. Some examples here might be the lobby or the reception area, offices, conference rooms, gyms, break rooms. And then some touch points to focus on are going to be things like doorknobs, handrails, chairs and armrests, desks and countertops. But again, this is not a comprehensive list. So make sure to take a look around your facility for the surfaces that people are going to be touching the most and make those a priority. It's also important to consider material compatibility prior to spraying and whether you have any sensitive surfaces in your facility, such as natural stone or soft metals like brass that could be negatively impacted by some cleaning products. And also make sure that you consider the area around the surface you want to spray as well, in case there's any overspray that might also impact those surfaces. Once you've picked your areas, plan out the right timing to implement this procedure. So these areas are going to have to be shut down with no people or no animals present during the cleaning procedure. So select a time where there's either low foot traffic or perhaps at the beginning or end of the day. I also recommend cleaning the floors as a final step in the process to make sure any overspray gets mopped up before people re-enter the area. All right, now moving on to some other application methods. The bucket is a popular one that's frequently used in food service areas to apply food contact sanitizer to surfaces. This type of bucket can also be used for disinfectants for like a cloth style application, but it is important to make sure the disinfectant that you're using is approved for application with a cloth. And this can be found in the directions for use on the product label. Another consideration here is to make sure that the solution in that bucket gets changed out fairly frequently, whether you're using a sanitizer or a disinfectant. Because if you think about it, every time you're putting that cloth back into the bucket, you're introducing more and more soil into your product. Eventually, that's going to make it dirty enough that it can't kill the germs on the surfaces you're cleaning anymore. So I recommend every 2 to 4 hours or more frequently if the solution becomes visibly dirty. A different twist on the bucket application is a disposable wipe system. So with this, you're going to put a roll of dry wipes into a typical wipes canister, and then pour your sanitizer or disinfectant on top to saturate them. This gives you the convenience of having wipes around, but allows you to use them with your existing chemistry. And it also eliminates the risk of soils being reintroduced back into the container, since each of the wipes that you use, you pull it out, you use it, and you discard it. These canisters are also designed to be reusable to limit plastic waste, but it is an important step to thoroughly clean and dry them prior to putting a new roll of dry wipes into the canister. And the last one I'm going to cover here is the mop and bucket application. So this is really useful for times or areas where floor disinfection is desired. Now, I don't typically recommend floor disinfection be used across an entire facility because just the risk of pathogen transfer off of floors is fairly low. But there are some areas where it makes sense to do so, and that includes restrooms in particular. This is a really efficient way to spread a disinfectant across the floor, but it has the same watchouts as the cloth and bucket method because, every time you put that mop back into the bucket, you're going to be adding dirt back in and making it harder for that disinfectant to do its job. So make sure that you're emptying and replacing that solution frequently. Some mop buckets do come with a removable waste bucket that helps to separate out the dirty solution from the clean solution, making it last a lot longer until it needs to be changed out. All right, so from here, I'm going to turn it over to Casey to talk through the importance of procedures.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So now we've heard about how to select the proper chemistry, how to select the right application method. So we're going to learn a little bit more about procedures. And this is one of the most critical things that you can do to ensure that your team is successful, both in the application of the product and that the product is actually efficacious. So on the screen, you'll see the 5 factors of clean. And as Amanda mentioned, Ecolab has been around for nearly a century. And we've always, really prided ourselves on providing the best practices for cleaning an operation from top to bottom, front door to back door. But really now the focus needs to be on this behavior shift at the unit level. So your staff, you may have new staff coming in, you may have old staff that need to be retrained coming back from maybe being gone for a while. And so really training them on the overall procedures is going to be critical. The 5 factors of clean that we see here are time, temperature, chemical action, mechanical action, and then the one around the outside that we're focusing on is overall procedures. So your employees really need to understand, and not only understand, but also explicitly follow these environmental hygiene procedures. As I said, this is going to be the number one thing to focus on. And we know it takes a lot of time to train your staff on these. So we're going to give you some tips and tricks here. I want to remind us of that analogy Amanda used at the beginning, the hammer to cut down a tree. As she mentioned, you can have the best hammer in the world. If you're using it to cut down a tree, it's really not going to do the job that you want it to do. So that's a great reminder as we go into this procedure conversation. So when we think about disinfecting in particular, and we know disinfecting is the name of the game when we think about the SARS-CoV-2, the virus that's causing COVID-19, the pandemic virus. When we think about disinfecting hard, non-porous surfaces, there's some really critical things to consider from a procedural standpoint. So as you likely already know, that wet contact time, also referred to often as the kill time or the dwell time, is really critical to allow the product to sit, be wet on a surface so that you can get that complete kill or inactivation of a virus. So listed here are those high-level steps to disinfecting. As Amanda said, a lot of disinfectants on the market today, including many of Ecolab's, are one-step disinfectants. And what this means is that they can clean and disinfect in one step. There's no pre-cleaning required. If you do have to pre-clean, we would recommend pre-cleaning when there's visible soils on a surface. If it's food particles or dirt or some other substance that you can see, the recommendation would be to pre-clean. But if you don't see anything, any visible soils, there's no need to pre-clean when you're using a one-step disinfectant. We then apply the disinfectant using the method prescribed on the label. This could be a spray application. This could be an immersion application, such as using a mop or a cloth or a disposable wipe. So applying the chemistry, how it's meant to be applied, is really critical. And then the most critical thing is to wait. And we know labor is one of the biggest constraints right now. And so, the tendency might be to kind of cut out this step or speed up through this step, but this is the most critical step to disinfection, and that's to wait. You really only achieve disinfection when the treated surface remains wet, as I mentioned, for that complete contact time that's listed on the label. And if you don't know the contact time of your product, this would be a great time to reach out to your chemical provider and ask them for that disinfectant contact time so that you ensure you're using the product correctly. So since the surface must remain wet for that contact time, this may mean reapplication is required. If the contact time is long, 10 minutes or something like that, you may have to reapply the product to ensure that that surface remains wet. Additionally, if you're using an application type such as a disinfecting wipe, that wipe can only hold so much chemistry. And so if you're disinfecting a large surface, you may have to use multiple wipes to make sure that that surface remains wet for that complete contact time. And then finally, the last step is to wipe the surface or allow to air dry. So Amanda mentioned if you're trying to clean a surface, remove any soils from that surface, you really do need to wipe that surface when you're done applying the chemistry and it's set for that complete disinfection time. But some products do allow for air drying as well. All right, so the next question we always get after we talk about hard non-porous surfaces is, well, what about those soft porous surfaces? We have a lot of those across our operation. It's not just limited to hard non-porous surfaces. What do we do about those? So we know that this is a huge concern. This is something that I hear on almost every single customer conversation or webinar that I participate in. And the interesting thing here is that our products are really formulated for use on hard, non-porous surfaces, the majority of them. Some are formulated for use on soft or porous surfaces, but there are very few that allow for disinfection of a soft or non-porous surface. And those that do allow for it are usually in the laundry realm. So when we think about cleaning a soft or porous surface, the CDC recommends for COVID times to follow these steps. Either remove visible soil that you can see on the surface with soap and water or a cleaner meant for that purpose, maybe an upholstery cleaner or a carpet cleaner, or you can use soap and water. Making sure that any product you're using is tested in an inconspicuous area before you use it broadly. We want to make sure that there's no compatibility challenges. And the best practice overall is if an item can be laundered, launder it. So that goes for drapes, that goes for bedding, that goes for towels, or anything that can be laundered, thrown in the laundry. That would be the best practice. Wash it according to the manufacturer's instructions, and then make sure that the item is dried completely. And then for any carpeted areas or rugs, we recommend vacuuming as usual. You might want to vacuum when there are fewer people milling about in case anything is kind of drummed up into the air. And also, if you have a vacuum with a HEPA filter, that would be a great option as well. So the next question is always great. We need to clean and disinfect more often, but how often should that be? So frequency is really, really huge. It's not something that we can prescribe, unfortunately. So there's not really a one size fits all, like everyone should be cleaning and disinfecting this often, because it's a risk-based decision. And what that means is it's based on the environmental variables in your specific area. The main environmental variables we think about when we think about cleaning frequency is infection risk, foot traffic, and soil load. So if we think about back to the beginning of the pandemic, there were very discrete areas that were hotspots for COVID-19, New York City being one of them. We are located in Minnesota. So if we think about rural Minnesota, a facility in rural Minnesota versus a facility in New York City, they had very different infection risk. They also had different foot traffic and soil load. So as each of those environmental variables increases, so too should your frequency of cleaning and disinfection. Hopefully that helps you kind of visualize. And now we know the risk has kind of spread across the US. The risk has increased everywhere, which likely means until this risk subsides, we should all be cleaning and disinfecting more frequently. All right, so now we've talked about procedures. You've put all this effort into these enhanced hygiene methods, but how do you communicate that to your end users, your customers, the visitors that are coming into your facility to make sure that they're reinsured? So one of the best ways to do that is to make your hygiene visible. So not only is it important to implement enhanced hygiene, as we've talked about, but also ensure that this happens during times of high traffic. So maybe it's the morning when people are coming into the office for the day, or the evening when kids are getting picked up from school. When there's people milling about, again, if we think back to that risk-based decision of frequency of cleaning and disinfection, when there's more foot traffic, more soil load, more people, that's probably the best time to be increasing that frequency of your cleaning and disinfection and making it visible. Things that used to be reserved for nighttime cleaning crew might now be flipped on its head. Maybe that's done first thing in the morning so that folks can see that that's happening. And this really is just a great way to reassure those that are using your facility that you're taking a proactive approach to hygiene. All right, so in addition to making your hygiene visible, there's many other ways to reassure your employees and customers. We just have a short list here. This is not meant to be extensive, but it is meant to, kind of offer some best practices. So one of the best practices that you might adopt is preparing a message for your employees to share with the customers upon arrival. So it's really great to have a consistent message about these are the top 3 things that we're doing at our facility to make sure that people are staying healthy, they're staying safe, and they leave in the, at the end of the day, they leave just as healthy as they arrived. And just the consistency of messaging, really helps with that reassurance. You might add signage or queuing throughout your operation. We've likely all seen this. If you're in line at the grocery store, you've seen those dots on the floor reminding you to physically distance from the people waiting in line in front of you. Maybe having signs if you're in a place that requires mask wearing in public areas, having a sign to remind your guests, hey, that's an expectation of ours, that you're going to wear that mask. When you're in a public area, you're going to maintain a physical distance from your neighbor. Maybe you're going to use a pump of hand sanitizer when you walk through the front door, just so that we can all collectively stay healthy. And then finally, you could consider giving your visitors the opportunity to provide some feedback on how do they feel when they're on site. Is there something that they would recommend that might help improve how safe or how healthy they feel like the environment around them is? And this is a great way just to reinforce that commitment to their well-being and make sure that anyone who visits is going to leave just as healthy as they came. All right, and then one final method of assurance might be procedure verification. So this really helps ensure that your staff are trained on that 5th factor of clean, that overall procedures. And there are many offerings on the market, from ATP testing to fluorescent dye markings to third-party audits. there's really an offering to meet your specific need. Each verification tool has different benefits and different drawbacks or different limitations. So it's really important that you make sure you vet all options and really understand your objective before you just pick a verification method and move forward with it. So one example of a really simple verification method that doesn't cost anything is visual observation. This would be a great thing to remind your staff, hey, we're going to randomly be observing you in your environment, doing your job to ensure that you're following the protocols that we've outlined. And this helps make sure that your staff knows that they will be randomly observed, and to ensure that if they have questions about a specific procedure that they ask. If you want to go for a more objective approach, you might use something like a fluorescent dye where you mark different high touch areas throughout your operation and then go back with a UV light and see, hey, were they actually cleaned off according to our protocols? And again, this is a great training tool. You can say, hey, there's low compliance in this specific area. And it really provides an opportunity for some enhanced training. All of this really leads to more effective cleaning and lower risk surfaces in your facility. And there's another type that we get asked about a lot, and that's ATP testing. This type of testing definitely has a purpose, but there are some drawbacks to it, one of which being that it can be cost prohibitive. So again, if cost is a constraint that you're worried about, there might be a better option for you. And it also does require a baseline analysis before it can provide useful information. So if you can follow, do a proper baseline and you have the money to spend on it, it's definitely a tool that has a place for procedure verification. So once again, understanding your objectives at the onset when you're picking which verification method you want will really help direct you to the proper tool to help answer your questions. All right, so that's really all the formal content that we have for today. We really want to thank you for your time, your attention, and I'm sure we have a lot of thoughtful questions coming through that we're going to answer in just a few minutes. But before we jump into the Q&A portion of your session, I wanted to remind you of some of the response and recovery resources that you have available to you today. Ecolab folks have been working fast and furious since February, March timing to make sure that our customers have all of the things that they could ever need in terms of resources. So go to ecolab.com/coronavirus and click on your specific market, and that will take you to a plethora of resources that will probably take you a while to kind of find exactly what you need, but there's so much good content in there that really it's worth checking out. These resources are meant to help you prepare your environments, to enable your staff to do their best work, and then again to reassure any customers or guests that come through your front door. And don't forget, if you have an Ecolab rep, they are always a resource. They can help you with questions, service, support, or any training as needed. All right, so now we will jump to the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I see we have a handful of questions that have been submitted. So if you have other questions you want us to cover during this time, just go ahead and submit them. You can see on the bottom of the screen at slido.com using the ISSA01 code. So the first question we have is, would it be appropriate for students to spray their own desks or areas with disinfectant? Casey, you want to take that one?
Yes. Yeah, thanks, Amanda. This is a really good question, and we know, again, labor constraints are huge. We want to increase that cleaning of frequency of cleaning and disinfection. And so, if the students are already at their desk, why not just have them spray? Well, the thing is, these products are really formulated for use by a trained end user, and we would recommend that that's only in adults. So on the label, you'll see that it says keep out of reach of children. We would recommend, again, that this is used by a trained adult that understands the proper procedure, the proper contact time, all the things we discussed today to make sure that you're getting the benefit out of that product.
Perfect. Another one for you, Casey. Would you recommend using an EPA-approved sanitizer for SARS-CoV-2 over a disinfectant for high touch points outside of restrooms or gyms?
So most sanitizers, I say most because there are a couple exceptions, but most sanitizers on the market do not have viral claims. There are very, very few sanitizers that actually have any viral claims on the label. So we would always recommend using a broad spectrum disinfectant for all of your disinfection needs in regards to viruses. If you are concerned about food contact surfaces, there are a couple products on the market. Ecolab has one of them that can be used for a food contact surface and address any concerns around a virus. But if it's a non-food contact surface, broad spectrum disinfectant is the go-to product.
Perfect. Will this presentation be available afterwards as a recording? Great question. Yes, it will. This is being recorded right now, so ISSA will host this recording on their platform, and you'll be able to access it. I think it'll go up in a couple of days, and then it'll be available through March. The next question, explain the differences between peroxide versus quat versus alcohol, and which one is eco-friendly. So I'll take this one. It's right up my alley as a chemistry geek. And what I can say is, so peroxide and quat and alcohol are all active ingredients that you're going to find in different disinfectants with different benefits, right? So peroxide has a really awesome reaction it goes through where it will actually break down into water and oxygen. And so that one is very friendly to the environment. It breaks down into things that are already found in the environment after use. Quat is something that there are many studies out there showing it is not typically biodegradable. So there are levels of quat that people are able to find in the environment long term. So that one is a little less eco-friendly. Kind of have to keep an eye on that one. Alcohol is something that, while it is less impactful, I would say, to like the aquatic environment or soil, it does provide a VOC. And so that is something that can impact air quality or cause hazards in the air as well. So between those three, I would say peroxide is definitely the most eco-friendly option out there. The next question, what efficacy testing results do you have on electrostatic sprayers providing effective coverage on surfaces? That is a great question. And what EPA has outlined is what they call confirmatory testing. And so it means that for a chemistry to be approved for use through an electrostatic sprayer, you have to test some very hard to kill bacteria to demonstrate that you can get that disinfection level performance. And you also have to test a very hard, basically the hardest to kill virus on your label, showing that you can also kill those viruses. And if you can demonstrate that, then you're able to submit your product for that approval. So it is definitely not insignificant. And it is showing that your product used through this equipment gets the same level of performance against some very challenging pathogens. EPA is also requiring that you demonstrate that when you use your product through an electrostatic sprayer, your surfaces can stay wet for the appropriate contact time. So that is something else that they are monitoring and is a good thing to keep in mind, again, as we think about contact times and making sure we're getting the right level of kill. The next question, does the electrostatic magnetic attraction work on all surfaces? That's a very good question as well. And what we can say is this. Most surfaces in the environment tend to have a slight negative charge to them. I like to think of it as the world is negative, right? But it's true. Some surfaces will definitely be more attractive to the electrostatic particles, the charged droplets, than others. So things that are considered to be insulators, so if you think of plastics, they may be less attracted to those droplets than something like a metal surface. But typically you will see some level of attraction between the droplets and the surfaces. Casey, this one can be for you. Do you sell the ATP testing equipment?
Ooh, that's a great question. We may, and we have a division that's specifically for food and beverage, and that's one of the most common applications for ATP. So we may have availability of that through our F&B division. We do also offer to our healthcare customers the DAZO monitoring, it's called, which is the fluorescent monitor or the fluorescent marking, and then you use the UV light to kind of figure out where was clean, where was missed. That helps as a really good training tool. So let's take down the name of this person, Amanda, and we can always get them to the right person if they're curious about verification tools that we have available.
Perfect. So if it is listed as anonymous, so if that is a question you would like us to follow up on, if you are the one that submitted it, go ahead and just submit your name through that chat function, and then we can follow up with you on that. All right, I will take this next one. So what is your opinion of the efficacy and safety of hypochlorous acid and aqueous ozone systems for SARS-CoV-2 in schools? So these are the type of systems that are typically what we call generate on-site systems. So what that means is that there's some sort of equipment, you're putting something into that equipment and it's actually generating a solution for you. So it's usually through some sort of electrolytic technology that it's outputting this antimicrobial solution. It is typically a very cost-effective approach to generating an antimicrobial solution, but it has some drawbacks in that these on-site generation systems are not regulated by the federal EPA. They're considered to be pesticidal devices, and what that means is that you have to register the facility that those devices are manufactured in, but the EPA does not review any efficacy data. They do not require that you do testing up to certain standards of performance, the way that normal registered disinfectants and sanitizers are. So you have to be very careful and very cautious when you're using those solutions because they can get by with a lot of claims that seem very positive on the surface, but are not definitely to the same standard that a traditional disinfectant that would be. So I would just have that watch out. I would say in terms of hypochlorous acid, that is, somewhat similar to bleach in that there are definitely some surface compatibility issues you're going to want to watch out for. Um, and for aqueous ozone systems, I guess my watch out for that one is that it's a very unstable system. So you will find many times there will be requirements that either your input water coming into the device has to be filtered or purified because even the impurities coming in through your normal tap water may affect the stability of it, or that the stability, the time that you're allowed to use that solution after it's been generated may be as short as a few hours or 24 hours. So just keep a watch out on that because you want to make sure you're not giving yourself a false sense of security and that you actually have juice in the bottle or in the bucket, as it may be, that is going to be taking care of those pathogens on the surface for you. All right, let's see if we've got some other questions here. Are all electrostatic sprayers the same? Are some better than others? Casey, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't say they're all the same for sure. There's definitely, different models that have different benefits or features. One thing that I want to call out here is the nozzle is a very critical component when you're applying a chemistry, particularly the size of the particle that's coming out. That can dictate how long a surface can stay wet. So if you have the option of buying a sprayer that has either an adjustable nozzle or a nozzle they're very clearly marked with what the size is and how long your surface should be able to stay wet, that would be critical. We would recommend anything over 40 microns as the best practice for using electrostatic sprayer. If you get much less than that, you start to get into the world of fogging, which is very, very different than electrostatic spraying. So making sure the nozzle is the right size is hugely important. Some other considerations are, how is the end user going to use this? So there are backpack styles, there are handheld styles, and depending on who is actually going to be applying the chemistry through the sprayer, they might have a preference. The backpack sprayer might get too heavy. If it's, a large tank, it holds a lot of solution, which is great. You don't have to go back and forth in the closet. So some folks might prefer that. Others might say this is too heavy, it's uncomfortable, I don't want to carry this around all day. So in that case, maybe they would prefer the handheld option. I'm trying to think of other. Amanda, what other specifications would you say make them preferential over other brands?
Yeah, I would say the other thing to pay attention to is going to be how it's powered. So there are battery powered options out there and there are corded options. And so again, depending on what it is you're trying to treat or spray, one may be a better option for you than another one. Battery powered ones are going to be far more mobile. So if you're covering a large area and you need to move across a broad space, you need to go from maybe classroom to classroom or office to office, that's a great option for you. There's going to be different battery lifetimes as well. So you'll have some batteries that only last 2 hours, some that last 4 hours. So pay attention to that. Corded options are certainly going to be ones where you don't have to worry about charge time, but they tend to be a little more tied in place, right? So if you've got a lot of surfaces that you're spraying in one set area where you can get around the room being plugged into the same spot in the wall, that can be a nice option as well. But I thought you brought up a really good point there, Casey, around the difference between fogging and electrostatic spraying. So I just want to touch on that really quickly. There is a difference between fogging and electrostatic spraying, and it's really around that particle size that's coming out of the equipment. So spraying really goes from 40 microns and up, whereas below that level is considered to be fogging or a misting application, kind of by EPA regulations. And so the real difference and why they drew the line there is all around impact to human health. So when it comes to droplet sizes, bigger droplets in the air, when somebody in the vicinity is breathing in, are actually going to get stuck kind of in your mouth or your throat. And those may be irritating depending on the chemistry, but honestly, they're not going to be super impactful to kind of chronic health or issues. It's when you get to the really small particle sizes down in like the 10 micron and lower level that things can get really down into your deep lungs. And that is where you start to see challenges with lung issues and really more chronic health effects. And so because of that, there is, again, a different set of testing required if a product is going to be used through a fogger or through those small micron applications. You will typically see a much higher level of PPE required. So there are very few products, again, on the market that are approved for use through a fogger. So make sure you read the label carefully if you find one that you may want to use through that application, and just be very cautious and very aware of the type of PPE you want to use just to make sure your staff are well protected. Another question we had come up is, can your product be used with an electrostatic sprayer on plastic surfaces without any harm to the plastic surface? So Ecolab's product that we have approved for electrostatic sprayers is our peroxide multi-surface disinfectant, and that is a chemistry that has very good compatibility on plastic surfaces. If you have a plastic surface in particular that you're thinking about, because there's very broad variety of actual types of plastic, right? That plastic's kind of an umbrella term. But if you know what type of surface you're thinking about, you can always spot check a small area of it and just see. But generally speaking, that product is very compatible across different types of plastic. So I would not see any issue with it. But again, if you have any questions or specific concerns, you can reach out to your Ecolab representative. And we have a technical service laboratory that is able to do specific testing for compatibility on any kind of surface that you think of or anything that is kind of critical to your operation as well. Let's see, any final questions? One, do you sell electrostatic sprayers? Casey, do you want to take that one?
Yes, we do. It's actually one of our newest offerings, just became available at the beginning of November. So we do have the option to buy electrostatic sprayers through our partner FSS. So you can actually go to a website and order them directly. We'll make sure to get that information. Maybe we can add it to one of our slides here with a link to where to order those. But we have both the handheld version available and the backpack style. So yeah, if you're interested in ordering them, feel free to use Ecolab as the resource for that.
Awesome. Now we have just a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to take just one more question and then we will sign off for the day. What is your opinion of UVC light for enhanced disinfection practice? That is another topic that has come up quite a bit lately based on the pandemic and people trying to kind of use anything and everything, right, to try to protect their spaces. There's a lot of good research out there around UV light being able to kind of kill pathogens and activate viruses and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of good science there, but there are definitely a lot of watch outs, I would say, and some very specific procedures you need to keep in mind. So the way that UV light works is it's got to be strong enough to kill the stuff that's on the surface. The further away from the light that surface is, the weaker the light is, and the less it's going to work. Any soils that are on the surface are going to block the light. Any shadows that are on the surface are going to block the light. So you want to make sure that the light gets moved around the space in lots of different areas to make sure you're covering all those shadowed spaces. And typically it's not recommended as your single source of disinfection. So it can definitely be an added feature to say, we've gone through this, we've disinfected this space, now we're going to shine the UV light on it and try to hit any of those things that we missed the first time around. It's typically how it's used in healthcare settings, is more as an added feature, an added benefit to make sure they're getting the best kill performance they can. So with that, I thank you all for your time and your great questions. Again, this recording will be available on ISSA's platform, so feel free to share it with your colleagues or others that may be interested. And we will sign off. So thank you, everybody.